meeting. It is our second virtual one, and hopefully all the technology correct. For members of the committee, if you do want to speak at any moment, please use the raise hand button or the chat function. I am going to try and monitor as many as I can, but if I don't, just wave on your screen. We've got at this meeting members of the committee, co-op members, and representatives of the Harrow Youth Parliament. We've also got Acting Chief Inspector Ed Belden from the Harrow, Brent and Barnet BCU, representing the Borough BCU.
Sorry,
it's Ed Belden. Yes. Acting Chief Inspector. I'm going to just go through a bit more of the formalities. Members of the committee, except the co-op members and the Harrow Youth Parliament, ensure that you have your video on at all times. Put your microphones on mute unless you're speaking. Other members and participants should switch off their phones and switch off their videos and put microphones on mute unless invited to speak. If there are technical problems, the meeting will be adjourned until we can solve it. So we managed to get that right. We are quorate, so this meeting will go on, and quorum is 4 councillors. This meeting is being audio and video recorded and is being streamed live on the council website. So anything you do on camera is being streamed live and recorded and will be put onto the council website. So bear that in mind. I'm just going to go through the agenda now. Item 1 is attendance of reserve members. Are there any reserve members in attendance? Not aware of any. No. Item 2 is declarations of interest, and we have trialled a new system this time where the interests have been published on the website. I believe, Jean, you've got one more to add to that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologise to Daksha. Yes, I'm vice chairman of the Trust Heath Robinson Museum Trust. I have sent that through, and I apologise it wasn't on earlier.
That's fine. This is a new system. I take it there are no other interest to add to that, in which case I'm going to move on to item 3. So item 3 is an open flow Q&A session. And the reason we've got this is that we know over the last few months, interest in policing and how the police operate has increased since the murder of George Floyd. And also we know that the issue, and we know that's have a substantial impact on ethnic minority communities. We know that also the corona virus has had a substantial impact on ethnic minorities, and also the enforcement of the lockdown rules have had some controversies over the impact that has had on ethnic minorities as well. So we thought this would be a good opportunity for the committee to question the police, question the cabinet member, and can I welcome cabinet member Krishnan Suresh to the meeting, so to question both the police, the cabinet member, to officers. Alex Dewsnap here is joining the meeting in his role in kind of leading on community safety. So what I'm going to first do is just ask Alex if you want to make a short introduction. I'll then ask the cabinet member. I'll then ask the police if they would like to make an introduction before we move in to a kind of more free flow of questions. Alex.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. So it's very helpful, as you've just set out there, Chair, around the fact of having a more sort of free-flowing Q&A on this. I think we've certainly come to the committee this evening without knowing all of the answers, if that makes sense. I think this is certainly something where, you know, the events of the last few months have certainly seen that there are very clear challenges, both in the, you know, from an international perspective and also from a UK, a London and a more local perspective around BAME communities, and how from all sorts of different angles, disproportionate representation in certain aspects of either criminal justice or other ways of inequality driving poorer outcomes for certain communities is very prevalent. So from our perspective, in terms of the police, and of course they can speak for themselves, but as officers of the council and the broader Safer Harrow partnership, we certainly want to work alongside the committee and with members, local members, as well as the committee, in order to try and understand what work we need to do locally and what new changes to policy may be required in order to try and change some of the outcomes which are not what we would want for some of our communities in Harrow. So those were what I just wanted to say in terms of the fact that we've come here in a reflective and very much an open mood, wanting to work with the Q&A this evening in order to create better outcomes as a result of that.
Thank you, Alex. Krishna, can I ask you if you've got any opening remarks? Don't feel you need to if you don't want to.
No, as a community cohesion and crime portfolio holder, what I found is during this COVID time, the community has pulled together the faith organizations and so forth, and they were there to help each other, which is showing how the diverse community built a bridge in Harrow, and which I'm so pleased with. And in terms of community safety, I think Harrow Council worked so well with the National Health Organization's guidelines. I think I have asked during this time. I asked the communication department to translate all the guidelines, like for the priority, the majority of the diverse community, to begin with the English after English, the Gujarati language and Romanian language and Tamil language, in order to make each and every community to understand how they can prevent and protect from this COVID-19. So that is why you could see now even it works so well. I mean, there is no, in the last month there is no sign of increment in the COVID-19. It's only less than 10. So which I'm so pleased. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Can I ask Acting Chief Inspector Belden if you'd like to make some opening remarks? It's the difficulty with these meetings. Is that?
I'm here.
Oh, you are here. All right, great.
Sorry, my mute button on my microphone on my headphones doesn't seem to work.
Oh.
So I was happily talking away to myself for a couple of seconds there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me along. I don't have any particular opening remarks. I appreciate that we've got a number of topics that were mentioned in the agenda. So I'm quite happy to go straight into any Q&As, really.
Great, thank you very much for that. One of the things we've looked through as a committee, we've been talking through issues around stop and search and areas like that. So I want to start before I open up is I've been looking at the numbers, and in Harrow you are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you are black compared to if you're white. And I wonder if you could talk us through understanding exactly why that is and whether you think that's justifiable.
Okay, so this is a question that isn't solely around Harrow itself. I know you've mentioned in regards to the figures there, it's the one that's being asked very widely across the whole of the country, is in regards to disproportionality in regards to black people being stopped and searched. Now, I think that to just say that it's down to ethnicity alone would be a lazy way of answering that. I think there are a number of things that feed into it, such as various crime types, the needs for the searching powers that are there, what those searching powers are addressing, and also the intelligence and the demographics in regards to suspects of crime within that area. I have asked one of my inspectors to start looking into this in regards to Harrow and the BCU as a whole, taking in a number of layers of different information, such as I've mentioned, the intelligence reports that we get from the public, the crime types that are occurring in certain areas, the demographics in regards to age and ethnicity in certain areas, and how that will compare across not just a borough. That's far too wide, because as we all know, parts of Harrow, there's totally different demographics to in the north, to say in the south or the west or the east. And it goes by wards to have a look at that. Well, yes, I think that's pretty much everything that I've got in regards to that at the moment.
Okay, I may come back, but I'm going to let other members of the committee, if they've got any questions on that, to come in. If you can use the hand button or the meeting chat to let me know that you want to come in, I will call you. Can't see anyone at the moment that wants to. Dan.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for your response. Just kind of my initial reaction to it was, are you implying that the stat that Sachin gave of 7 times more likely may be due to kind of statistical error based on what kind of crime or which location, rather than a systematic issue that isn't just confined to Harrow, but London and the rest of the country? Is that what you were saying there? Because if you can't clarify that, that would be good.
Certainly, yeah, I can clarify that. No, I wasn't saying that it's down to a statistical error. I think that there's a number of things that need to be looked into in regards to why within, well, looking at London as a whole and then looking at Harrow. So why Harrow, a small part of London, would have a, as you say, a figure there where it's 7 times more likely in regards to being searched if you were black rather than white. I mean, I've got the figures in front of me here, and for the last 12 months, I can tell you exactly how many people who identify as black and how many as white have been searched within the period from July 2019 to June 2020. And it certainly doesn't say that it's 7 times more likely. The exact numbers, 1,294 white people were searched, and 1,474 black people were searched. And that's just for Harrow. Not amazing at maths, but that's definitely not 7 times more likely. However, when you look at the amount of population, it is a disproportionate amount of the population. But I think that there's a lot of information that needs to really feed into that answer to say why that is happening.
I see, Dan, is that okay? I see Jamie. I just will come back on the 7 times. So that is the June number, and it's you can't use the actual number. You need to use proportion of population. So it is 7 times more likely on proportion of population on the June numbers that I took from the website about an hour ago. Jamie, Jamie, sorry, I've done that before as well.
That's fine, no worries, Sachin. Hiya. Well, I wanted to just make one point and ask one question, if that's okay. I know, Sachin, you're saying it's 7 times as likely in Harrow. In London, the figure, if you're BAME, is that you're 2.5 times more likely than a white person to be stopped and searched. And that actually increases up to 10 times as likely if you're in a vehicle. So I just wanted to sort of make the point that it seems, I'm also not amazing at maths, but also it seems that it could be the case that Harrow is potentially either the numbers are more disproportionate in Harrow than the average for the rest of London overall. But my actual question that I wanted to ask was that I read recently a black female officer, there was an article in The Guardian, and she wrote about, as a BAME officer, she's concerned because you are twice as likely than a white officer to be subject to misconduct allegations. Obviously, it could massively help fix the issue if the police force themselves are more representative of the population. So is there anything that you are currently doing, or any ideas that you have of how you could support BAME officers and the representation of the police force?
So looking at the Metropolitan Police as a whole, we do a lot of recruitment drives, particularly within the community of London, to try and make sure that it is representative. If you bear with me 2 seconds, I can draw out the figures in regards to the breakdown that we have. The Northwest, this isn't for Harrow, because for those of you who don't know, we work as a Northwest BCU, so that's a merger of Harrow, Barnet and Brent. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a more specific, but all these officers work in Brent at some point. So in regards to police officer strengths for the Northwest Command Unit, we have 1,597 officers in total. Of that, those who identify as BAME are 329. I work out around about 20%. Now, across the whole of the Met, I think the breakdown is slightly lower. So on Northwest BCU, we do have a better than average within the MPS representation of BME officers. But yes, there's always a lot more that we can do in regards to that. There are a number of schemes within to try and support officers, and this is something part of the equality advisor just doesn't target in regards to BME officers. We also do positive work around female representation as well, in regards to supporting those officers who wish to get promoted, or if we identify within the MPS certain squads or certain teams that don't have a fairer representation across this, then they do also look to support officers from whichever background isn't represented to get in there. Okay, is that okay, honey?
Yeah, that's wonderful, Sachin. It sounds to me like they're doing the similar thing that you're doing, of making sure that panels are representative. So thank you very much, Sachin, and thank you, Ed, as well.
Great, thank you. I know Stephen wants to come in, but I'm going to bring in Krishna as the cabinet member, just because whether you want to come back on that point. I can see on the chat that a number of people are having a problem with the raise hand issue. So you can do what Sarah's doing with physically putting your hand up, or use the chat. But I'll bring Krishna, then Stephen, and then Candy, then Sarah in that order.
Thanks, Sachin. I know the Section 60 matters, but on the other hand, what you need to appreciate is when you compare that with the neighbouring borough and with London, we are still the crime rate is still very low, and we are the second safest borough in London. So I think which matters in terms of safety. Yes.
Great, Stephen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today. I just wanted to ask, just on a slightly different angle, what sort of just wondering if officers from Harrow, to what extent they've been involved in policing some of the protests that have been going on, and if so, to what extent, what sort of challenges have you faced, particularly when you add sort of COVID into the mix, and how that all has worked together, and how that's all gone.
Stephen, thank you very much. And that kind of leads into some of the agenda items that were originally shown to me, which was in regards to the effect of COVID on the police service. So I've got a few figures for you, and I've got a little bit of work that I've done prior to this for that one. So in regards to the effects of COVID on police to start with, and then I'll move into a little bit in regards to the protests that we've seen downtown. So this is across the whole of the BCU. We have seen an increase in regards to antisocial behaviour calls. These peaked around about the week of the 6th of April, which ties in with when we had about the second week of lockdown, where we found that crime was going down, the number of ASB calls were going up, and this was a lot in regards to people reporting people breaching COVID distancing or social distancing legislation within parks, within their home, which on our system will then be registered as antisocial behaviour. So that's why we see a very, very high peak, even, I'll get the right word, in ASB calls. But overall, we haven't seen a massive reduction in ASB through the rest of it. It also just seems to go along at a nice level. One of the things that has affected us is in regards to how we've had to change to accommodate continuing to contact our members of the community. And I'm not saying in any way that we've got this perfectly right yet, because using systems like we're doing here, although it's probably been around for 10 years or so, the police being the police, we're very slow to get onto it because we like to talk to people face to face. But this is the way forward in many ways. We've had over the years contact points, street briefings, and this may well be a way for us to be able to communicate to a number of our harder to reach communities. However, we don't want to lose sight on the fact that not everybody is on this, and there still needs to be those traditional old-fashioned face-to-face meetings. One of the initial concerns prior to going into lockdown was the amount of staff that we would lose, and I was glad to say that over the first few weeks we did see a peak, but nowhere near the amount of officers that we were anticipating. We were working on figures around about or the loss of local staff around about the same level as the 2011 disorder, where we saw a lot of officers going off to deal with the disorder there, and we haven't seen that sort of level of abstraction from our staff. And we've been able to cope quite well in many ways due to the fact that we haven't had people taking annual leave or the courses that would normally be running because they were cancelled. We've actually had quite a glut of officers to be able to use out and about on the streets. One of the other issues, sorry, Jean, I see you've got your hand up. Are you wanting to ask a particular question in regards to what I'm going on about here? You've got the mute on. You've still got mute on, Jean.
You're still mute.
Modern tech.
If you want to continue, we have Jean.
I was waving my hand, but because the raised hand is not working on these.
Okay, that's fine. We will bring you in.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
So and the last bit is in regards to the use of our powers over the COVID-19 legislation. So we're looking at here the issuing of FPNs. Now, I'm sure you're all very much aware in regards to the 4 E's that we were using of enforcement, engagement, not in this order, education. And I'm glad to say that across the whole of the 12 BCUs, the 12 boroughs that make up the Metropolitan Police, the Northwest BCU had the lowest amount of FPNs with 29 that were given out. That's across not just Harrow, Brent and Barnet. And Met-wide, I don't have the figures for how many, if at all, there were any arrests made. There was only 36 arrests that were made solely for COVID-19 issues. So that's an update on the effects on the police in regards to crime, and I'll just touch on this very quickly because I know that I'm waffling on for quite a bit here before I move on to the disorder. The effects of COVID on crime, we have seen a decline in regards to crime, as I'm sure you've probably seen on the figures. This started around about the 20th of January, where we were on Harrow, we were looking at 1,500 crimes for that month. It hit a low in April of 1,039 crimes. This is the lowest our crime rate's been since February 2016. But we have started to see a slight increase in May, and I don't have the figures yet for June. But the averages over this period has usually been around about 1,400 crimes. So we are well below average currently. And moving on to the last part, we have obviously seen our local officers have to go down to central London to police the various protests that have been going on. And also in regards to that, I'm sure you've all seen what's been going on, not just in London, but countrywide in regards to a number of unlicensed music events, raves and old-fashioned money. We've also had our there's nothing new to due to the fact that London is the capital city of England, and that's where most people use to protest. So although it has had an effect, it's not something that we are unaccustomed to.
Great, thank you.
Hopefully I've covered the first two agenda items that were originally sent.
You've covered a great amount, thank you. We may come back to something. I think the quote "a glut of police officers" is going to be my tweet, my next tweet. I take the order. I've seen a number of people, so the order I'm going to go with is Canty, Sarah, Chris, Jeff, Elia, and then Jean. So that's the order in which I'm going to go in. So Canty. Lost Canty.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, there we are.
Right. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick
Canty, you
questions.
just need to move your video down a little bit. We're just getting your forehead at the moment.
Oh, is it? You don't like my forehead? 1 second. Sorry.
Well, we like your face even. Oh, there we are. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a sit-stand desk, so anyway, I'm sitting now. Right. So just coming back to this 2 questions. One is what I think portfolio holder for community safety mentioned about letters. So I'm just sort of seeking clarity, because if the council has done letters or leaflets, I'm just one, how did you identify where to send them? Because essentially most of the community centres have been closed. So I'm not sure how this went out or how they relate to residents, because I haven't seen any. So it'd be useful to know how the council dealt with that. The second question, I think more focused to the new inspector, sort of, yeah, welcome to the borough. And just a quick question, something on touched on again regarding community outreach. Yeah, I was just sort of wondering whether there's been any continuity in terms of what Inspector Tanya Sprungs had started in terms of community outreach and some of the ideas and projects she had. I mean, was there any continuity? Because it seems like there might be some kind of detachment from what it started, and whether we've lost that kind of connectivity. And also, I think similarly, it seems the council seemed to have sort of got detached from, there was an agenda a couple of years ago in terms of what community outreach had done and who had been identified, because it seems like this has been done again recently. So is the council losing touch from time to time with what, how we connect to the whole borough in terms of communities and so on? So just if you can get an overview from the inspector and from the portfolio holder, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Krishna, and I think Alex also on this one. So I bring in Krishna and Alex, and then Acting Chief Inspector.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, I mean, all these translated guidelines is being circulated through email to the appropriate communities. But by all means, if all the councillors would like a copy of this, I can circulate all the translated ones to each and every councillors who you can even distribute that to the appropriate communities. This is Romanians and Tamils and Gujarati communities.
No,
so
I appreciate. Sorry, yeah. Krishna, I appreciate, because the problem is, one is a bit late if you're saying this is now when you decide to send it out to councillors, and secondly, the people most in need of this do not have emails. So let's understand that. So because there has been a concerted effort right from the beginning of the pandemic to have a joined up thinking of how we connect to community. So this is completely, not joined up with that. So I'm just a bit concerned with that. That's all.
I do agree with you, Candy, because I want that to be reached to each and every corner of our borough. I'm down to that person. I even wanted to by myself, get the hard copy, get that delivered, but unfortunately, during this the sensitive time, I couldn't do it. But by all means, I mean, you don't know, where the world is standing at the moment. It could be another spike. So sure. By all means, I can do that for you.
Okay, yeah, please. So I just feel that it's not the best of options, and I'm happy to have a discussion with other people as well. So I think more needs to be done on that. Thank you.
And hopefully Alex will be able to supplement this. Normally he's got always very helpful answers.
I feel set up there, Chair, but I will do my best. So just to follow up on that, I mean, on Test, Track and Trace, we are currently piloting a piece of work specifically with the Somali community through HASVO, who are the community organisation representing the Somali community and voluntary organisations within there. And what we've done through there is specifically design, working with them, communications that will work with their community by the understanding of their reflections on how it works. So we've gone for a video, which we've made sure that the content in terms of the technical aspects around Test, Track and Trace work. And we signed that off with them last week. They are making that video with some of our support on a videography perspective. But as a very visual community, it's important that it is not just about posters. It's also about things that can be dealt with on a digital means. We've also got a local Somali lady who is featuring on posters, again, as a way of making sure that the communications connects in with that community. And we're also trying to make sure that HASVO themselves feel like subject matter experts when it comes to Test, Track and Trace by working with them on myth busting and things like that. Now, that's been a relatively intensive piece of work. We're looking at rolling that out to other community groups within Harrow, so that if we do ever get into a position where there is a local lockdown, we have got our ability to work through and with local community groups to make that happen. But as I say, it's, capacity and resource is an issue because it is a stretch just working with one. Working with all of our diverse communities is where we want to target, but we won't be able to do all of that at the same time. So hopefully, Candy, that gives you some reassurance in the way that we are managing communications. I just also wanted to pick up on the point you raised as well around work that started around, so for instance, with Inspector Sprunks, we had the Keeping Faith Community Safe event last spring, summertime. We have been working with the police in the transfer from Tanya to the new inspector, which at the time was Ed, around having another one of those meetings set up for the spring. But unfortunately, COVID-19 impacted on that. I am also aware, as we've touched base on, around the work that we started around specifically on certain temples. And that will be something that, I haven't as yet, but we'll be raising with the police and our community safety teams about how we can bring that back into the fore as well.
Okay.
Sorry, just a quick supplementary to Alex, please.
Quick.
Yeah. So Alex, in terms of that video, which is a great start, I was just wondering whether we had one that is borough-wide, so you don't have to repeat the work. And I understand the need for focused community groups as well, because that could be an add-on. I just thought it'd be a better idea if we had a one Harrow-wide campaign or poster or video, which can then be adapted to the need of local communities. I thought that'd be the correct way to go, if possible.
So we have a text which can therefore be the basis of the translation into a community language. So that's not a problem. But what we wanted to do was make sure that the video itself was something that reflected and was something that could connect in with the local community. So it is someone of the Somali community speaking in Somali of the key aspects of Test, Track and Trace. What we'd want to do is replicate that across other communities where actually a visual or a digital means is the right way forward. So again, what we're doing is we're reflecting on the feedback that they are giving us as the best way to connect and communicate and engage with their community.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Ed, did you want to comment on any of those points?
No, other than the welcome. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And yes, I do want to. I think that the work that we're doing in the Somali community is fantastic. So well done for everyone that's working on that. I'm going to bring in. Chris has had his question answered, so I'm going to bring in Sarah now.
Thank you. Thanks very much for coming this evening. I had a few questions around policing. The first one I think has partially been asked, which is what do you consider to be the greatest challenges at the moment in terms of policing? And then as a consequence of that, do you require additional resources? And if so, have you received them? Or do you feel that there's additional training needs and have they been implemented? Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much. Funnily enough, your second two questions actually two of the points which I would say are one of the answer to your first question, which is what is one of the greatest challenges to policing. To me and my team at the moment, one of the greatest challenges to policing is in regards to the number of officers that we've got coming through. Having over the last few years been looking at how do we evolve policing with a reduction in numbers. We're now currently getting and to use the word that the chair likes, a glut of police officers coming through again. We're getting quite a lot of trainees coming through, and that in itself is meaning that our training is having to adapt in regards to not just the amount of people that are coming through, but also to the extraordinary situation that we are currently in. Again, I can sit in a position where I understand a little bit of it because my good lady, my partner, is a trainer at Hendon Training School. So I hear quite regularly in regards to the challenges that they've had to compact a training package for these officers into a short amount of time, and then on the streets I'm having to assist my officers in how we then develop them further. And I'm sure that's something that's happening across the whole of the Met, not just within Harrow and the Northwest BCU. So yes, that is one of our greatest challenges currently, having a reduced estate and having had a reduced number of officers, supervisors, trainers and skills. We're now looking at expanding slightly to be able to adapt over the next few years of having a few more officers back with us.
Great, so is that okay? Let me follow up.
Sorry, and thank you for that. That's really, really helpful. Can I just ask, will there be an opportunity once we kind of move beyond coronavirus for you to be reviewing the impact of the changes that you're bringing in? Is there a period for you to reflect on that and see what can be learned from that?
I'm going to say hopefully there will be a period. However, sod's law will be once one emergency stops, another emergency will happen. So yes, I would like to say that there will be a review period, and it's hard for us to now sit here post lockdown and do a review because actually we're still in the grasp of this emergency. All we're doing is we're in part 2 of the emergency. So as much as there is regular hot debriefs in regards to what we're having to put in place to say, is it working? Do we need to continue? Hopefully that's all being captured, and at the end of this period, may it be soon, please be it soon, we can then look back over it, see what's worked well, maybe some stuff that we have, and has that had an effect of us stop doing it? Do we need to go back to it? Do we need to say, well, actually we don't need to prioritize that anymore? And hopefully we can evolve that in how we're going to go forward. As I've mentioned before, the use of modern technology in regards to being able to reach out to so many members of the community in this way could save hours and hours of my officer's time. So that's hopefully something that will be continuing.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Great, Jeff.
Right, hello, yes, can you hear me?
You can.
Right, yeah. I think you've covered most of the questions I was going to ask in response to other people. There's 2 areas that I would like to ask about still. One is there's been various reports, and there was an article in the New Statesman a couple of weeks ago about quite a large increase in domestic violence during the lockdown period. So can you give us any idea of what's happening about domestic violence in sort of Harrow, and has there been an increase in Harrow? And the other area really that I wanted to ask about was, obviously officers are going to have to sort of take specific measures and change some of their operating procedures because of the virus. So really, just generally, how has that impacted their efficiency, do you think?
Thank you, Jeff. Unfortunately, I don't have the figures in regards to the amount of domestic violence that's gone up. I'm afraid I wasn't prepared for that one. I'm just having a quick look. The reason why I'm looking over here is I've got another computer that's got all the stats and data up. Unfortunately, it's just the public Met page, and I can't find where it would break the violence against the person crimes down to the actual domestic violence bits. However, we did have that very same concern, because I'm quite an experienced police officer. And I can tell you one of the busiest times of the year for domestic violence is a Christmas period.
Yeah.
Because everybody's off work and everybody's stuck at home and everybody's got nothing else to do other than start having an argument with their partner. And we've taken that and magnified it by 4 months nearly. For the vast majority of people. So it doesn't take a person with a criminology degree to say that that is going to increase the number of domestic violences. But unfortunately, I'll have to come back to you in regards to the amount of numbers that is and how that's affected Harrow, Jeff. In regards to measures that we have had to take in the officers, there is a certain amount of our work that is up close and personal. In regards to having to arrest people, search people, deal with victims of crime, deal with people who are ill or injured. All we can do is risk manage. We can't be avert from that. So we have given officers additional PPE, such as face masks and hand washes, hand sanitizers. We've also now, so initially when it started, there was a team that was made up of officers from the London Ambulance Service and the Fire Brigade who would go along to COVID-19 related deaths, and they would deal with those deaths where normally it would be probably LAS and the police would turn up. We've started training for officers who would attend a COVID-19 sudden death, because there's a number of things that isn't just about dealing with a dead body that they would have to consider. It's also the effect that that might have on family members, and normally family members might want to go in and see the person and etc. So it's about how they can deal with that. In regards to our normal practices within the workplace, obviously modern technology assists us in a way, because now the officers have tablets or laptops where they won't need to stay so long within their ward bases. They can break out into other parts, and maybe not the stereotypical computer desk that they've had in the past. They can go out. So we've been able to alleviate some of the social distancing issues in regards to that. However, when we send one sergeant and 6 officers out on aid, there's still no getting away from the fact that they're going to be on the back of a Mercedes Sprinter in close proximity. So we do have a track and trace program that is being tested in regards to those sort of scenarios, and also if we have an officer that goes down. Also, we have previously, working from home has been a very occasional use, whereas now with modern technology, we've embraced working from home in regards to officers who don't necessarily need to be out and about on the streets. So not your uniformed bobbies who you would see walking the street, but those who offer the backroom functions, investigations that they can still do from home. So there's been a lot of things that we've had to bring in that maybe would normally have taken us probably 18 months to embed. But I'm sure we're not the only ones that have had those issues.
Great. Alex is able to come in to answer on domestic violence. So can I bring Alex in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, so both in terms of incidents and offences, they have increased over the period from when lockdown started, and that's both in terms of an increase in general and an increase against trend. Even though it is, relatively, it is above trend, but it's not spiking as such. But in terms of the data I'm looking at the moment, I can read it out, but it's probably not that it's not that helpful on the basis of how it's presented in the chart that I have in front of me. But one of the things around domestic offences with injury, that has remained static in terms of around about the 500 mark. So in terms of the fact that there has been an increase in reported issues, a slightly less around actual what has turned into offences, but no change in the amount of actual injuries as a result of those domestic offences. So if that's helpful for the committee and helpful in terms of answering Jeff's question.
Thank you, Alex. Jeff, did you have any follow-up?
Can I just... Hello?
Yeah, you're on. No, you're off again. There we are. I think, Jeff, I think you're pressing it twice. Just press it once. It's a bit of a delay, so if it doesn't work, just wait for a second. There we are.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on now.
Right, sorry about that. Yeah, in terms of domestic sort of violence, though, it doesn't only include actual sort of violence. There's also sort of the fear that people can have, which can be very considerable, which is an assault in its way in itself, although not actually being hit. So I think that's a sort of another aspect which it's always important to consider.
Yes, you've got lots of nods there.
I can come in very quickly if that's helpful,
Yes,
Chair.
yes, Alex.
So the services that we have, that we work with the police on, in terms of, we have an IDVA service which is there to support victims. We also have a MOPAC funded role within the hospital as well, within Northwick Park, given the fact that there are a number of domestic violence incidents which end up at A&E, and therefore having professional services which can support nurses to spot the signs and therefore refer in to the support. So I completely agree, Jeff, that you know, this is something much broader than what the data ever tells us, and we always reflect the fact that the data underreports the reality of what's going on in any society, including that of Harrow. So we are alive to that fact, and one of the things that we are looking at is what we can do around the recommissioning of domestic violence services, and in keeping with what comes through with the domestic abuse bill finally gets passed, which will hopefully be at the end of this calendar year, gaining royal assent and hopefully coming with some funding for the services that we provide in partnership with the police as well. So we completely concur with everything you say, but we really look at it as a broad range of the support that we put in place as well.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Eli, and I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing your name wrong because I think you've corrected me in the past. Eli Youssef, can you tell me off if I pronounced that wrong as well?
I mean, it's pronounced Elia.
Elia, thank
yes.
you. I will remember. I will write that down. I will write that down.
Thank you. So I've got 2 questions on policing. I've got 2 questions mainly. And my first question is in regards to community outreach, because obviously right now, the community and the police aren't on very good terms. And obviously that's due to external factors like the tragedy over in America and the issues with police brutality over there. But at the current moment, there's also things happening in London, especially, and this region as well, where young people do not necessarily feel safe around police, and the community in general doesn't feel safe around the police. And I'm curious what the police are doing to try and remedy that and rebuild and rekindle a relationship with the community, especially young people in the community. My second question is in regards to knife crime, because obviously during this coronavirus period, the amount of violent crime has decreased rapidly. But we know that once this period is over, it's going to massively increase. So I'm curious what the police are doing to at least try and slow that down and make sure that when we get back to normal, knife crime won't be as prolific as an issue. So those are my 2 questions.
Ed.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the first part of your question, I'll have to go, okay, I appreciate what you're saying. It's not necessarily what's being fed back to us in regards to every part of the community having a full breakdown in regards to their relationship with the police. It's certainly not something that's borne out from a lot of the people that I speak to. In regards to, though, increasing our outreach to the community, yeah, it is something that I don't think we can ever rest on our own laurels and say we've got it perfectly right, because nobody's ever got it perfectly right. And we will look to our partners and the independent advisory group to assist us in directing how we can reach out into the community. I don't know if you if everybody's aware here, we do have a group called an independent advisory group on each of the boroughs. I believe Harrow's one is currently being revamped, and they advise us in regards to a number of issues. So yeah, I accept that we're not perfect. I don't accept that every part of the community has broken down that relationship with police. And it's something that we will continue to work and improve on as we go forward. In regards to knife crime, yeah, I agree, it is one of our concerns as well, that as normality comes back in regards to, if we go back to how we were just prior to the COVID-19 restrictions came into place, that there is that chance of knife crime again going up. And can I say that we're not idle in regards to what we're doing. We're seeing this as a little bit of a respite in how we can then bring in what has worked in the past, new ideas in how to tackle that, including not just about enforcement, but in regards to education. We're looking at on Harrow, or as a Northwest BCU, literally just in the last few months, we've managed to increase the number of officers on our youth engagement teams to be able to go out into the community and hopefully prevent these sort of crimes occurring, rather than just looking at enforcement and going out and flooding areas with police officers to stop and search.
Okay, Aaliyah, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, so I thank you for your second answer, and I think that that's a good response, and I think that's what the police should be doing, because obviously youth engagement is very important. And I wanted to focus on your answer to the first question, because I mean, I think it would be irresponsible to assume that there hasn't been a level of distrust there. And you said we're not perfect, but you didn't admit that there is that, you know, level of tension. And I'm coming here as a young person. The reason why Harrow Youth Parliament has a seat on ONS is to essentially give the young person's point of view. And from my point of view and the point of view of my peers, there is a breakdown in that relationship with the police. And you didn't mention how the police were working on community outreach in this regard. I do respect that it is hard for the UK police, obviously being impacted by you know, external factors outside of their control. But I think it's very important that you at least admit that there is a problem there, so that it can be remedied. Because in the future, when people go back to becoming stop and search on a regular basis, you know, here in Harrow, you're 7 times more likely if you're black, according to the statistics that Sachin brought up earlier. There clearly is a problem, and that problem, much of it affects young people. So I think you need to go back and look at that.
Okay. No, I fully appreciate what you're saying. And as you mentioned, it's from the perspective there. I mean, we do have things like the public attitude survey that does feed into in regards to confidence and satisfaction. Confidence being the feeling of the general public and what the police officers are doing, not necessarily having had any contact with the police, either as a victim of crime or for any other reasons. Satisfaction being how we gauge how a victim of crime feels in regards to how we have dealt with their issues. So that's something that does feed into us. Also, as I mentioned in regards to the IAG, one of the things that we're also looking at, and it's quite interesting that you're on there, I'd really like on the Youth Parliament, and I'd really like to speak to you in regards to how we could get a youth IAG, to how to be able to advise us in regards to some of these very issues that you're mentioning there. So rather than just having, for want of a better word, the adult IAG, not saying that people who are youths aren't classed as adults either, but having that sort of younger perspective in regards to it, to be able to point us in many ways and how we're going to affect people over the next 10 to 15 years, not just over the next 2 to 3 months.
I welcome that completely. And if you'd like to get my contact details, if you want to do a consultation with the Harrow Youth Parliament, I'd be welcome to facilitate that, as well as work with the UK Youth Parliament, because this is something that is very important. Youth consultation is very important. And if you are willing to do that and possibly implement a youth IAG, we'd be willing to help out with that, willing to get young people involved, because people do want to see, you know, the community connection. So thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, could you please pass on some of the details for me?
We will certainly do some matchmaking after this. Jean.
Thank you.
Good. First of all, thank you for that response to Elia. Some years ago when I was chairing ONS, we set up a review for Scrutiny, which involved young people and communications and engagement. And I remember one particular meeting that we had is that these two young blokes came in with their hats on the wrong way around as other people's eyes, and they said, oh, you're in the wrong meeting. And they certainly weren't in the wrong meeting, they were there at my invitation. So I think these perceptions have to be attacked all the time. And if you could set up that youth group, I think that would be terrific. So thank you for that offer. My question is a bit about ASBO and maybe ASBO, for ASB, not ASBO, maybe as we're opening up a bit, things are changing. There are two questions that are really just from my experience, because we've covered a lot of my other questions. Most recently, we had a settlement of travellers in my ward in Hatch End. And there was an additional concern. I had residents, really ringing up and terrified on two levels. One is that travellers were establishing a base there and music, etc., etc. And two, around COVID, they were very worried as well. The short answer to that is that the police worked with us as me as the ward councillor, absolutely brilliant. And I'm wondering whether there's more of a trend for movement around, and therefore the police have to put themselves in quite threatening situations, given the COVID distancing that still needs to apply, and how you approach those sort of problems. Because they did manage, with the help of our officers, to get them away very quickly the next day. But the police are only human, as we said earlier. How do they manage it? What training do you give them? How do you teach them to use their common sense, really, and protect themselves?
That'll be the magic one, is how to train common sense. I'm sure we've all know that that's something that people sometimes have or don't really. However, and I'm going to put my cape on here a second and have Superman written across my chest, is COVID-19 is not the worst thing that's out there. And my officers go out and put their lives in danger on a regular basis, not just due to COVID, but in general. And this is just yet another thing that they have to deal with. So they are trained. Just to prove a point, somebody's coughing as we talk about COVID-19. But there is, within the officer safety training that is run out, we talk about what's the word that I'm looking for? It's the fighting arena of a person being at the front. You talk about giving people distance, and these are all things that, although they're there to be trained in how to keep our officers safe from physical assaults, it's also there to assist with certain issues such as this general spreading of coughs and sneezes and diseases, of staying out of that breathing range of people. So it's not something, it's something that's implied within the training, not necessarily always something that is given out specific for the illness. But we do also have regular awarenesses about certain things that come through, such as noticing the effects of Ebola, various other diseases that have happened over the years. I mean, 12 years ago there was swine flu, and we do have periodical ad hoc training in regards to the various how to deal with issues.
Thank you. That's really helpful. May I just come back with a supplemental?
Yeah, sure.
This is different, but again, I witnessed it as a resident. I've seen a number of drug exchanges, people driving up with a car hanging out a package and someone giving some money and pushing off in a couple of parts of the borough. Plus there are some enclaves around drug dealing, and that seems to be more, what can I say, in the open. If everyone knows there's a certain pace in a certain park, where you can go and you know, get drugs. And again, the SNT recently did attempt to bust a group, but it seems to be more prevalent. And apart from doing what you do, what are the police, the state and neighbourhood teams, etc., advised to do in terms of these? They seem like not new dealers, but the smaller groups that are growing up out of the larger groups like county lines and so on.
So one of the things that particularly the safe neighbourhoods teams will deal with. So Jean, if you're dealing with Hatchend, you're dealing with Pete Law and his team.
And Wesley.
And Wesley, yes, I know Wes best.
Yeah.
So part of their remit is to look at the longer-term problem solving. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily just get out there, stop the dealer, arrest them, put them in jail, gone, done. That's usually just nipping the head of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. They want to look at why is that area particularly being targeted. So one of the things that we look at is victim, offender, location and time. So in this circumstance, victims are the queen in regards to drug offences. The offender, why are they going there? So you could look at, if we find out who the offender is, doing some sort of target hardening with them. And then the key one for me is the location in regards to these sort of drug offences. Why is that an area that people feel safe to go down to deal with drugs? And that's where myself and Alex's team will work closely together to work in how we can design out crime and make that area somewhere that they don't feel safe. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, yes, that might mean just flooding the area with my police officers, but that's only going to, I think the Cambridge research is one officer can stand there for 20 minutes and has a residual effect for 6 hours. Unfortunately, I don't have enough officers to do that for the whole 24 hours. No. But so that's why we want to be able to have that effect without us even being there.
Okay. And can I just say about the dealing through a car window and then buzzing off? Someone just came out of a house, walked in the middle of the street. Someone came along, given a package, and I didn't even have a chance to take, you know, the registration number because it was just like that. That seems to be more, I don't know, not prevalent's the wrong word, but you know, out there more. They feel more emboldened to be able to do that. And the individual I witnessed at that time was a young woman who was clearly under the influence of something, probably a drug.
Yeah, and it's something that's probably been quite prevalent due to the once the initial parts of COVID-19 have died down, is one of the byproducts is regards to everybody being at home. We've had a lot more reports of, oh, that address across the road having a lot of visitors, and we've been able to find a lot of drug dealing places as well as prostitute addresses. So we thrive on intel. Without the intelligence, we don't know that there's a problem. One of my biggest bugbears as a police officer over the years is speaking to people going, oh, this has happened. Did you tell the police? Well, no, I thought they were too busy, or I didn't have enough info. Every little bit is a piece. To just know that somebody's going to that area is enough for us to start looking.
Okay.
So what I'd say to everybody, if they ever speak to anybody within their community in regards to any of these issues, is please make sure every time you don't even have to ring us on 999 because it isn't an emergency. Ring us on 101 or Crime Stoppers, or even on the internet now. You can just send a report in, and every little piece helps to build us that picture.
It's the brazenness, really, isn't it? So yes, thank you for that. It's helpful.
Great. Is there anyone else that wants to come in? If you do, I'm not seeing anyone else. So I'm gonna wrap us up. I'm just gonna make a few comments, and then I'll wrap us up. And I do want to pick up on the point, Aaliyah's point around community and how they feel about the police, because it has deteriorated. When I've been talking to people about you coming today, that has been the thing, especially from the black community, saying, well, look, we keep getting stopped and searched every time. We've seen reports in the media, and you know, I know that they're always taking a snippet, and there are wider investigations happening. And what I'd like to impress, we've had a very tragic incident of a Harrow resident who was murdered, and police officers taking selfies with themselves with a dead body. A horrific thing. And I know there's an investigation going on, so there'll be very little Ed you can say about that. But all of this feeds into this feeling that the police do have an issue with certainly ethnic minority communities, black communities in particular. And I wonder if as we wrap up, if you've got any comments you want to make, maybe on that case, but more generally as well.
So in regards to the specificness of the case, one, I'm probably not allowed to say too much due to the fact that it is an ongoing investigation. Two, I don't actually know more than what's been out in the press itself. What I would like to say is both Ed Baildon, the Chief Inspector sat in front of you here, Ed Baildon, a human being, no matter what the ethnicity of the officers, ethnicity of the person, the victim in those regards to that, the nature of that act, if that has actually happened, is fundamentally wrong, no matter what. And I think I speak for the vast 99, well, probably 99.99% of the officers to say that was a disgusting act. And they themselves are very upset by that. And I would like to think that it wasn't any of the officers who serve you within Harrow, ladies and gents. I'd just like to say they weren't from the Northwest BCU. Yeah, it's disgusting. The whole of the SLT are disgusted in regards to that. And I can't begin to tell you how sorry I would feel for that person's family in regards to the situation that somebody that holds the same rank or the same job as me has done that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's very useful. What I do want before we finish, I want to say all of us, every single one of us, are safer because of the work you, Ed, and your colleagues do. We are immensely grateful for for the work the police do. I see it day in, day out. It's a job that I wouldn't do. You put yourselves in danger. You do hours that most of us can't even think about. You do it in incredible conditions, and you do it, and you get criticised for doing it a lot of the time as well. And I want to say, and I can see from all the nods around here, how proud we are to call ourselves counsellors to be served by police like yourselves and your colleagues, because it's a hard job. You put yourselves out there. So thank you very much.
And ladies and gents, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Let's we can clap to that as well. Thank you very much. I think we've had a really good session. It was free flow, but I think we've all been able to get the comments made, and we may end up with we almost certainly will end up with a youth version of an independent body looking at the police. So I think that's a real positive outcome out of today. So I'm now going to close the session and move on to item 2. Ed, you are of course welcome to stay, but no doubt you've got a family, so you can leave now if you want to. So I'm going to move on to.
Thank you very much, ladies and gents. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, and Krishna as well. Thank you very much, and of course.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you. We move to item 4 on the agenda, which is COVID-19 economic recovery and update. Again, there was a paper circulated, which was the cabinet report. So it is again a bit of a free-flowing question. We have the leader, Graham. We've got, I think, certainly we've got cabinet member. I think we've got cabinet member Varsha. I know she was unwell, so I'm not sure if she's able to make it. I think Adam's with us, and I can see we've got a number of officers. Paul Hewitt's here. Alex is still with us. Is the chief exec with us? So it's really hard to see who's here.
It's Paul and I from an office perspective session.
Right. Brilliant. Okay, so I wonder, Paul, if sorry, Alex, if I bring you in now to introduce the report, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be very, very brief. This is a regular update that we now give Cabinet, and obviously very happy to bring it to scrutiny as well. Obviously, within it, there is some clear data around the fact of, from an economic recovery perspective, we may be moving from a health crisis into an economic crisis, both from a national and a local perspective. So we just wanted, through the report, to highlight from a public domain perspective and also from an accountability perspective where the data is saying on this. So there is a section in there which clearly articulates where we're seeing in terms of universal credit and benefit uptake at this moment in time, and the level of furloughed staff within the borough, or furloughed workforce, furloughed employees, and therefore how that could impact quite drastically on the employment position and therefore on the wealth and hardship perspective of the borough. The other aspect of the report is the emerging lessons learned. I think this was something that you as Scrutiny were very, very keen on when Sean and members also came to the committee at the beginning of June. So this is the emerging piece of work on that, and obviously we'll be looking at that in more detail as we move through the year, but thought it was important that we had an initial view on that, and that is both a member and an officer perspective on that. So that was all I was going to say by way of introduction. Very happy for the leader or for Adam to add any further aspects to what I've said, but obviously we're here to answer any questions and wanted to make sure that we maximise the time for you as a committee to do so.
Thank you, Alex. I know the leader does want to come in, so Graham.
Thank you, Sachin. It's just a few points, really. This is the report that's going to Cabinet on Thursday and presenting it. And as Alex has just said, this sets out our current position, but also around emerging issues. And I think some of those we need to draw out. Wouldn't mind a wider discussion around them. The pleasing part was that during this emergency, the adult social care team have not needed to apply any of the Care Act easements that were allowed by government or under the temporary legislation, which is a very good positive. But as we've come away from the winding down from the crisis, we're seeing waves of need emerging in terms of mental health and associated grief, loss of and bereavement, as well as more acute suicidal and health self-harm presentations, and some of that you were discussing a bit earlier on. There's some other points as well. I won't go into the environmental issues because they're already in there, but I do think we need to look at some of the emerging issues around children looked after. There's a growing pressure there because some of this has paused during the pandemic. Adam's here who can talk about the finance parts in great detail. We do face quite significant financial challenges, and we're trying to work out how we can get through that, and we're waiting for government announcements to actually support us through that. But the part I really want to talk about is the economic recovery, which is in the report tonight, and how we're going to respond partly from Harrow and partly across the West London Alliance. So I think we need to be quite clear that we've had nearly over 10,000 people apply for benefit through the benefit system for universal credit. We've had a quite significant increase around council tax support, and we've also seen 30,000 people furloughed, and we've seen some of the larger organisations, as the government's furlough scheme is withdrawn and moves to part-time, notice of closure and redundancies are starting to appear. So we did ask for, through the Oxford Economic Team, who advise government around budgets, to do some work across the whole of the West London Alliance to try and get a clearer picture of how we're going to be affected in sort of northwest London, because quite clearly we cannot cope with this on our own and doing all the work that would be required. We do have a large number of micro businesses and self-employed in Harrow. We have a lower level of people in the hospitality area, so we're going to be affected a lot differently than some of the other boroughs. Heathrow Airport is a major employer, so Hounslow could be desperately challenged if the airlines go ahead as they've been making announcements around. But we mustn't forget that we've got nearly 10,000 people who work at Heathrow Airport living in our community. And also we have the knock-on effect as well, that our high level of micro businesses, they're very highly reliant on people sort of shopping locally and working locally. So it's not just talking about economy, but we're also talking about how we can rebuild. And I think some of the interests you've had before through scrutiny is around how we rebuild through the town centres, housing, infrastructure, a lot of the growth sector, which is coming through North West London, but also how we deliver a low carbon economy. So because we've got micro businesses, we're leading that from a Harrow perspective. Paul Walker, who's the corporate director, is the strategic lead for North West London around environment. So he's also leading on the carbon economy and low carbon economy delivery. But I think it's worth reading the Oxford Economics report on the basis it does set out a very clear picture of the struggle we will face. And that's sort of saying the short-term significant impact. So what we're also trying to do is around introducing training and development to re-skill people into alternative industries. We've been successful on a number of grants that cover over a wide area, and people are already sort of applying into those schemes, which is really good actually, and it's really positive. And that's also highlighted in the report. Adam might want to give you more around the finances, but just because Varsha can't make tonight, just on environment, we was always concerned about businesses reopening quite quickly on July the 4th on Saturday, and I think credit to where it's due, the teams who've been out working with businesses to explain what they can do and what they can't do and what they should do around the guidance, but also the businesses in Harrow that have really sort of brought into this and really understood it and are sort of managing their venues very well. You know, we haven't had the complaints we've seen in other parts of the country or London. There's only one incident that the team had to get involved with, and you know that's sort of minor and compared to some of the other issues we've seen with massive congregations in central London that have taken place. So I think credit where it's due that it has. I'm touching wood here that that it has gone well so far. We thought it'd been easier if it had been a Monday sort of start of the week, but a Saturday, a lot of football back on the television and sports back on the television, and people do start heading out, and I think it was well managed and controlled. And that wasn't just the council, that was also in partnership with Ed's team, Belden's team, who was here earlier on, visiting all those venues regularly right up to the midnight, and also on the Sunday. And I think it's been very useful sort of exercise, and they've done very well. So thank you very much. I'll go on mute now until I'm invited back again.
And thank you, Leader. I'm going to bring in Adam, just if he wants to bring, and in terms of committee members, I've seen Chris and then Jeff. So Adam, then Chris and Jeff.
So I won't add anything at this stage. I'll take any questions. Thanks.
Great. Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the first thing, early on in the report, there's a lovely bit about adult social care. I've been offering services. Can I say to the vulnerable, I'm very impressed with that. It's come through. I've had a phone call every week asking if I need help or do anything as a shielded person. Well done, Harrow. I think if it's got through to me, and I wasn't initially shielded, but then put into shielding bracket, very impressed. So well done, Harrow, on that one. Secondly, just coming further down, just trying to scan through my notes as I've got them, so I apologise for a minute. The questionnaire going out to citizens in the way forward with social care, I think is critical, and we need to look at it in great depth. And I know Paul will most probably make a comment, but the whole way of looking at social care now has got to change for, I think, some considerable time to come. And therefore, what we've got to do is develop the best. That questionnaire needs to be looked at in depth and as many replies as we can possibly get to get the best value for money out of it. And then the other one that was mentioned by Graham just now is the increase in numbers of children needing help now, and how stretched are we actually getting, and are we near breaking point or not? I've got some other questions later on, but that was, thank you for that to start with.
Great. Who wants to tackle those ones? Graham?
Yeah, I can do. I totally agree with Chris about the shielded list. You know, the list started off, we expected 5,000 at the beginning. We only got a list of just over 3. But as the pandemic went on, GPs started to get involved. That went up to about 13,000 people on our shielded list. And the team at one time was sort of hitting around, phoning about 16,000 outbound calls had taken place to people on that shielded list. We've kept note of those people on the shielded list if they do contact the council coming forward. The pressures on social care is very real, I think, and I think Paul Hewitt had just come back from his holiday, but would probably be better placed to answer that one. But what I would say is that we are working very well with our partners across the health sector. So we got with the CCT through the Health and Wellbeing Board. We are doing a lot more work that, together in a very good partnership sort of way. So that is actually sort of supporting some of the work the council and how they respond is actually improving. But I think Paul will be in a better position to answer your question around the questionnaires and way forward.
Yeah, can we bring Paul in?
Yes. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for inviting me. Just to address the issue of increased demand, it's certainly true that now that lockdown is being released, that we're seeing those waves of need growing. So just to give you a kind of sense of the quantum, and these are snapshot things which you need to take in context. So mental health presentations at the hospital, for example, were 3 times as great in the last 2 weeks as they would be ordinarily. So 15 presentations at the hospital for acute mental health issues, whereas in an average week you'd get 5, maybe 5. And similarly, in terms of suicide attempts and acute mental health issues, we've had 42 suicide attempts since the 23rd of March. So these are very serious acute issues. Not all of those attempts were successful, if that's the right word. But they are symptomatic of some of the increases in need. For our looked after children, certainly we've had an increase in numbers of children received into the care system. We're not at breaking point, but there has been an increase, a significant increase, I think, over the last 2 or 3 weeks. The numbers of children on child protection plans have gone up, more than 300, which is pretty unusual. So these are obviously snapshot figures. We don't know if this is an ongoing trend, but this will present challenges to our frontline staff. We do have very committed, dedicated staff, as you know, but they are tired, they are exhausted. They have been running services for 7 days a week since the 23rd of March. So this will be a challenging time, and we need all the support that we can get from our partners. We are getting really strong support, as you'd expect, from schools and from the voluntary community sector. So one of the great pieces of learning, I guess, from this pandemic has been the need for a whole system approach. And certainly the system is really pulling together both health and social care. And there is greater recognition from the public of the role of social care, alongside and with the same esteem that we give to our health colleagues. So that's very important that we don't lose that, and that we consolidate that going forward, and that we strengthen our workforce in terms of their skills and the support systems around them.
Thank you, Paul. That was very, very, very useful and very worrying numbers, in fact, especially around suicides and mental health issues. So thank you for that. Can I bring Jeff in?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to agree with Chris Moat, actually. As I've been shielded from day one, certainly the council officers have made good effort to sort of contact me every so often. I'm not sure it's every week, as I think Chris said, but they certainly are contacting people, so they're clearly on top of their game, so well done. But what I really wanted to sort of ask Graham particularly, I suppose, was the 16,000 micro business, of the 16,000 companies in Harrow, the vast majority are micro businesses employing 0 to 10 people, I think it is. Clearly they're extremely vulnerable in this sort of situation. Harrow has a very small sort of major commercial base. We've seen companies like Wicks, Ladbrokes, whatever, all leaving the borough before this happened. So I think Harrow's in a very weak position economically when it starts again. But we've also, for reasons I think we will understand because of finance, etc., got a very small economic development team, which I think does sterling work under Mark Billington. I think tribute should be paid there. But there's only so much effort that or work that can be done by an extremely small number of people, and in the coming couple of years with the predicted sort of fall in the GDP, you know, it's going to be extremely difficult to sort of boost up the local economy and the businesses in Harrow. And I'm interested really to have the leaders and anyone else's thoughts on how we can boost the economic development team and economic development. And I think the major sort of industrial enterprise in Harrow is actually retail, which, as we all know, because of the internet and sort of switch to home delivery, which is probably going to be exacerbated by what's happening, is also under a great deal of pressure. So could I have your thoughts on that, please, Graham?
If I bring Graham in, and perhaps Adam might want to say something as well, but Graham first.
Yes, Jeff, you've raised a very important point around the micro businesses. We do have the largest number of any borough in London around the number that we have. It's between 2 and 10 employees, and because our economic development team, although exceptionally good, I call them award-winning because they're awards they win for the services that they provide. It'd be very difficult to do this on their own, which is why we're doing it across the West London Alliance, which makes up the 6 London West London boroughs. So the things we're trying to do is part of it is around digital connectivity to ensure that some of that moves online stuff is available fast enough to do it. It's connecting the micro businesses and entrepreneurs together to actually to grow businesses in a different way, but it's also to signpost them to the amount of support that's also available. So some of the financial support that's around support around ESOL, sort of English as a second language is a key one with some of our micro businesses and trying to move them forward. But it's also seeing how we can provide workspace to try out different ways of operating. I think also when we look into it, it's about promotion as well, about all the schemes and businesses that are around in Harrow. And we're looking at how we can do that through, and some of it is through the accelerator schemes that have been announced that we've worked with in the past. And some of that is around the prosperity funds that are available, and we're bidding into those. So instead of sort of individual businesses trying to do something on their own, we're coordinating for a wider scale to bring in that sort of massive, quite wide support. And I think it's around it's a lot of things is around training about how they can operate a lot better themselves. And some of it is sort of just simple things like filling in returns. What we have learned through this pandemic is that a number of businesses hadn't sort of thought of changing the business rates over to their own account because, you know, they're getting business rates relief and didn't think they needed to. So it's actually given that sort of guidance to enable them to run in a more efficient way. It is a very challenging sort of area, and that, you know, Harrow is going to be quite widely affected. But most of our micro businesses are, I think, mainly accountants. You know, we've got a very large number of accountants in Harrow who do work independently, and our fear is that they're going to get the knock-on effect of other businesses closing down or going into financial challenge and difficulty. the other part we're looking at is, I know loans are available, but they're not very good for small businesses, because you then build into a long-term credit arrangements that are difficult to get out of. And that's what the micro businesses have told us for over a number of years. So we're looking at how we can support them in different ways, whether we can get them the interest-free loans, which is slightly different, or even the grants that are available to push that forward. It is going to be a big piece of work. There is a lot in the Oxford Economics report that's worth reading about that, specifically in Harrow, with the number we have and how we're going to go and try and support them. But we're also looking at the entrepreneurship that's taking place around Hammersmith, which is sort of a digital gateway into London, of how they can also support. So we bring in the peer support and other areas. This is an area that's in Adam's sort of sphere of understanding as well, through some of the work he does as well. And I think Adam would probably be better explain it than I could around some of the other aspects that the support that be coming in.
Thank you, Graham. And as Graham's said, we've got a lot of accountants in Harrow, so we'll bring in Adam, our chief political accountant. Adam, you're muted.
I definitely don't have any kind of accountancy qualification, and I definitely wouldn't want to pretend otherwise. And you're right, Sachin, we do have a lot of accountants in Harrow. I think it's one of the most densest boroughs in the country for accountancy. I actually wouldn't add a huge amount to what Graham said. I think he's covered a lot of it. Clearly, we need to understand the business identity of Harrow. So, for example, we know we're a really significant retail centre, and there's a lot of work that's going on to make our high streets really attractive destinations. We know that there's a lot of self-employed people in Harrow, and other things that we can do to continue to make ourselves a really attractive borough for people who want to come and maybe work remotely, and work from home or operate small businesses, professional service businesses in the borough. We do have some access to business support services. London Business Partnership, which is linked to on our website, is available. But I think just nothing we should say should underestimate just how extraordinarily difficult the current time is for businesses in Harrow, and of course also for the businesses that people in Harrow work for. Which there are many people in Harrow who commute into central London, and their companies will be struggling as well. They will have taken pay cuts. Some of them, many hundreds and thousands will have been, furloughed. So this crisis, I think Alistair Darling said, he said it was more significant than the financial crisis in 2008. And while we just got to make sure that we can do everything in our power to make Harrow as attractive as possible for people coming here, setting up businesses and thriving as businesses. We just shouldn't pretend anything else than this is going to be incredibly tough for everyone in the borough.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. I'm going to bring in Stephen, then Candy, then Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Graham, Adam, and all the officers that are joining us tonight. There's a number of issues I wanted to cover, if that's all right. I'll try and be as brief as I can. Firstly, just wanted to pick up where we are on business grants. On the small business grants, so obviously, these are a lifeline for the small businesses that are eligible for them. I note on page 15 of the supplementary report that there are still some outstanding. I just wanted to get an idea of where we are, when we can expect these to be resolved. And I know many of us are still getting queries from people that applied several months ago, still awaiting resolution. So just wanted to get an idea of when this is going to be resolved.
Graham or Adam?
Shall I come in on that one?
Go on, yes.
So I think we think about this as a little bit as the tortoise and the hare. So we know that we struggled a lot at the beginning, partly because of the size of our team, partly because the nature of our businesses, partly because of our IT arrangements. We threw a lot at it, and now we are in the top tier of authorities in terms of the percentage of grants that we've paid out. So over £33 million has been paid to Harrow businesses, which I'm really pleased about. And I think you're absolutely right now that there are still some grants that are outstanding, and we obviously need to address those. But almost, I would say, every single case has some quite substantial complexities now. And I'm seeing certainly the cases that I've seen come through have been ones where, you know, the ratepayer is a different name to the applicant, different name to the account, the bank account details, where there are all sorts of issues with, you know, leases that need to be demonstrated, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, it does get technical, and we just have to work with those businesses as quickly as we can to get those grants paid. And it's obviously still a huge priority for us, but you know, the reality is that there is just some back and forth now that's required on almost every one of those remaining applicants. The other side of this is, of course, the discretionary, so-called discretionary business grants, where we have a very small amount of money to pay something like 200 businesses. I believe we're now, I need to check the latest net figures, but you know, well over half or so of those being paid. Challenge is trying to make sure that we identify, get the businesses that need our help the most, and so we're working through that and continuing to see how we use the full amount of money. But it is, I would just set the expectation that is a very small amount of money available. I think it can help something like 1% of Harry's businesses. So while it's important that we get the money out to those who can help, we shouldn't pretend that it's going to solve the challenge for businesses in Harry.
Thank you for that. I do appreciate there are some quite complex small business cases. There do seem to be some more straightforward ones which have also for some reason been delayed. I mean, there are some cases where it doesn't look like they're looked at until they until they bring it to the attention of a councillor, and a councillor raises it, and then it gets and then they seem to sort of suddenly they're able to pay it out the same day. So I would urge that those be picked up. On the discretionary grants, I would like to say at this point I'm very grateful to Mark Billington because he's been very open to discussing the criteria of the discretionary grants, and particularly in relation to people that fall through the cracks, such as those that have business based at home. And that I've been grateful to see that those have been picked up. Just wanted to raise a different issue, just in terms of the financial position. Just wanted to get an idea of council tax. What do we have a projection of what the impact's going to be on collection rates of council tax over the course of the year?
Yeah, so I guess two things on that. So two points really. The one is that, I think the analogy of falling through the cracks is unfortunately the wrong one. It's more like falling through the caverns. There are far more businesses, that won't benefit from any grants than do, and so we just have to. It's more like trying to, really find the ones that are going to, for whom it will make the biggest difference. Than the idea that there's just a few that that they won't benefit, unfortunately. In terms of council tax collection rates, we're keeping a very close eye on it. I think that we have done better than quite a few councils. I obviously can get you the kind of exact stat in terms of our forecast. We have done better than many councils because we didn't rush to say, no one should pay their council tax. We said, look, it is actually really important to pay your council tax. And I had to put my face on the front of the Harrow newsletter one week with a headline, please pay your council tax, which as a politician, doesn't fill me with joy. But actually it was really important because that's how we're going to obviously pay for all the services that are going to actually make a difference in the crisis. And that meant that we haven't suffered as big a loss as others, but it is substantial. And we know that every percentage point on a council tax is £1 million or so. So we've obviously published some projections in terms of the total loss that we're submitting to the government. But we can get you more detailed stats on that if helpful, Councillor.
Yeah, that'd be quite useful actually, particularly in the context of the overall financial position and what assistance we might be asking for. Also, just on a different topic as well. Just wondering what sort of, I know that there's been in terms of sort of modal shift and transport and that sort of thing. Just want to get an idea of whether there's been any monitoring of the impact of the various different transport measures on local businesses and economic performance. And on a related measure, obviously at the beginning of August, we're going to see people coming out to shielding, and those sort of people are still going to want to be minimising their contact with others. They will probably be wanting to drive more than others might do, and therefore may also need to park close to their destination. And I'm just wondering if that's being picked up in the overall scheme of things, and whether any provision will be made for those type of people to be able to come out and access the things they need to access, safely and easily.
Who wants to take that, Graham or Adam?
I can. Yes. So we can say that since through the pandemic, the air quality has improved as the vehicle use has gone down. But we also recognise that TfL's passenger numbers has reduced by nearly 95% because people weren't travelling that much. Even with a gradual return into people returning to work in some areas, it's still exceptionally low. I think it's below about 15-20% of capacity of where it needs to be, and we've seen that through the finance arguments that take place. But what has learned around a lot of this is that people are actually going out more through walking and cycling and using different modes of transport to get somewhere. And I think it started a really serious debate around not just air quality, but also around the amount of vehicle usage that's taking place, and probably unnecessary vehicle usage. So we, in Harrow, we have a very high percentage number of car use in the borough previously, and that has reduced, or it did significantly reduce when people stayed at home, but I think that has reduced overall, and we just need to keep that journey, no pun intended, but we need to get that journey going about the amount of car usage around. I think a lot of it is the car usage goes up when around the schools and people taking children to school. That at the moment is quite significantly reduced, even though nearly a quarter of the student population is back at school. And I think people are starting to realise about the effects that some polluting vehicles do have on the health of others. And it's good to see that a lot of the younger generation are moving towards using other forms of transport rather than relying on motor vehicles. I think it's also really, I think we should have a genuine argument. I think Michael Gove put this a few years ago around you have to have a proper debate and discussion around different sort of hybrid models of vehicles rather than just relying on the old diesel and petrol vehicles. And that is something that we're pursuing as well.
Okay, Stephen, I'm going to bring some other people in, and then if you've got more, we can come back to you. Kanti, and then I've got Sarah, Jeff, come back again, and Chris. So Kanti and Gina.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions in terms of just getting this joined up thinking back in terms of what the council is trying to do. I do understand it's never easy trying to balance things, but one of the concerns that I'm not raising for the first time, I have actually raised this previously, is this problem that on one hand, yes, I do congratulate the council that we actually demonstrate we can move quite quickly if we really wanted to, and this is in relation to the sort of the street space program, which I think is commendable that the council is able to move pretty quickly. The problem is now, we are finding that despite sort of getting representations to you from businesses, actually now you're refusing to listen, it seems, and we got a big problem which I'm going to explain. So effectively, I think you've had representation from the shopping parade around Stretfield Road, the Kingsbury Circle, Kenton Road connection, Belmont Circle. So what I might just want to highlight here is the fact that yes, I think not due thought has been given to the fact that maybe every parade is different, and there is a case of saying has to be some kind of parking availability for that business, the shops to work. The other problem is that the Lego bricks, as much as they're quite easy to put there, are actually quite unsightly and give the impression that something's not right here. So it's actually been discouraging people from going to shop there really. So, and the fact they've lost parking, and I know in Belmont Circle definitely they have left a disabled parking bay, but that doesn't mean people are aware of it. So I think it's a contradiction that we on one hand trying to think that actually we're resolving a problem, but we're not. So I think there's serious concerns about that. And can we get assurance that you are going to act at the speed of lightning to actually go back and review this, the representations from the businesses? And my second question regarding the street-based program, which again is a demonstration of like our new capabilities, because yes, our website doesn't work, but then we notice the street space program, if anyone noticed, was actually seen to be hosted by Amazon AWS. Now, which is great, but it's a contradiction that you're getting the support of Amazon AWS to try and kneecap businesses which are being losing business because of Amazon anyway. So I mean, I just see that as a kind of a contradiction in terms of what the council stands for, what it's trying to encourage. So I think a debate needs to be had on that. And can we get assurance that we are going to get this debate and the council is going to listen to businesses?
Graham.
Yes, I think you need to step back slightly to a few years ago. We lost our grant from TfL around our road structure, nearly £700,000. So a lot of our road programme comes out of our capital budget, or what we call our LIP funding from TfL, which is between 1.2 and 1.3 million pounds. Because of the changes, the funding arrangements with TfL and their loss of income, and also the government bailouts part, we lost our LIP funding. Now, when I talk about our local improvement plan funding, that also talks around our road safety improvements, transport, the whole lot. Most of our funding for road schemes in Harrow are paid through that funding, which is now gone. So that whole project we had lined up around controlled parking schemes, road safety, cycle schemes, everything has been paused until we get that funding through. So that leads me to the street space scheme and trying to get a proper understanding of it. The government announced back in their budget about putting a few £billion into road structures, and then during the pandemic they signposted some of that money indirectly into enabling street widening and make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists on the roads. And for London, that was focused through TfL. So we only had a week to do this, put in a number of bids for schemes that would improve pedestrian access to a lot of areas and also make it safer for cycle routes across the borough. Some of our schemes were rejected, like the ones in where the main cycle scheme, the Quiet Ways route that we had from North Whit Park Hospital through to Harrow Weald, that's still been rejected. It's on pause, and we're going to see if we can get the funding through for that. But a number of smaller schemes we have been given funding for, like the Belmont Circle, and the ones through Green Hill, the town centre, another pavement improvement schemes which had to be in place by September, and they will be. The cycle schemes, the temporary cycle schemes, are in place is after being assessed by the TfL team and also by the government, because they wanted to ensure they're put in place. So if we don't go ahead, we will go out to consult on these schemes, and if there's we can't go ahead, then we just don't get the money to it. We give the money back, and then we have to bid in for different schemes. It's not like they're giving us a big pot of money and say, get on with it. This is funding for particular schemes. Now, your comment around Amazon is a bit well, I couldn't really understand the point, but really other boroughs have been using street space to consult with, and it made sense that we went through the same sort of consultation portal where it can be updated a lot quicker and easier, especially when we was also making major changes to our own website. So it is open up to consultation. It has had a significant response, and majority of people are very positive around the improvements that are taking place. But as I said, most of it is you've seen around that it improves pedestrian access by removing the parking on some roads. It makes people can pass each other on the pavements a lot easier, and it also makes it safer for cyclists, because we don't want to see an increase in cycle accidents.
Sorry, Graham, you've not answered my question at all, because you tried to explain the scheme. My question is specifically around how businesses are being affected, and I think it's just a request to say that yes, we accept that action need to be taken in terms of what the follow-up to the pandemic is in all respects, but the fact that business is actually coming back to us and telling us that there are problems and issues that need to be looked at and resolved, and the council just not listening to that. And then we're having this meeting where we're being told, oh, you know, we got to support businesses more. But if you can't do the basic listening, then you have a problem, Graham. That's what I'm trying to allude to, really.
Well, you've been through you've had a number of briefings about some of these schemes, and it's all actually been partly told of why we're doing something and what we're likely to do going forward. Now, the option is that if we didn't do anything, then it would make it worse for businesses because they would people wouldn't be able to pass there in a safe manner. So it's all about road safety. It doesn't mean we can use this funding for anything else, which is I've been regularly asked, saying we don't want this scheme, we want to do something else. These schemes are not just signed off by the council, they're signed off by TfL as who are coordinating for the whole of London, and also by the government Department of Transport who are funding it.
Okay, I'm gonna, Candy, I'm not gonna take any more on this. Sarah.
Thank you. There was two questions. One of them, I just wanted to pick up on that phrase about digital connectivity. And I just wondered, obviously, with increased kind of remote working and working from home, were we offering any support to businesses and residents to help them with their digital connectivity? And if we aren't at the moment, do we have any plans in the future to help that kind of potential shift in people's working patterns? That was my first question. And the second question was about young people and jobs. And is there anything specifically that we're doing for young people who've lost their jobs to get them back into the workforce again? Thank you.
Yes, so that's two key areas that we're working collaboratively across the whole of West London. So some of that for the part around remote working, we do have some of the highest numbers of any London borough of people who've been working from home through this pandemic, and they're working through with the internet providers to increase that speed. So a couple of years ago we were successful in that bid to improve the 5G outlet, and which comes down the railway line. I think the one that's been upgraded already was the Kenton systems, so that allows for more data download and a faster internet speed across parts of our networks. But I think we've just got to remember there is some people aren't used to working from home, and we've always been concerned about the effect on people's mental health from working at home, because people normally like working with each other. You can do some days at home and some days with collaborative work, and it always works quite well. So they're looking at a lot of that through online training and support that's coming through. There's also around the remote working, is as people start going back to work and find their jobs has gone. So we're looking about how we can use our business economic development team are looking about commissioning in training programs around sort of reskilling through a number of new roles. Specifically, I think about how we reach out into the green agenda that's coming through, which leads me into the young people one. I think there's two elements here. One is around jobs and training and giving that opportunity, because I think the job market has completely changed, and it's making sure that they are supported through. And it's a challenge because we're not sure where the university area is heading at this moment in time. There's people who've got uncertainty of leaving school at the moment with their education. So we're looking to sort of working through with some of the voluntary and charity sector and community sector to actually do some of the more training around that to sort of give people work experience and through into that. We've also trying to make better use of our apprenticeship levy of how we can support people into longer paid jobs and sort of new training opportunities. And we're also looking across the economic area of West London. So as I said earlier, just an example about Hammersmith and where it's become a digital exercise area about how we get people to actually get there, because of the cost of getting through. So it's about the travel and those areas. We're also looking at through into Heathrow Airport. So if that is a major employer and it's got a lot of subsidiary companies under that, of how they recruit and make sure they recruit locally. I think my major concern is about the younger people is then a lot of people that are sort of over the age of 14 have been sitting at home away from school for a period of time and not allowed to go back to September. And I think Ed Belden hit it on the head earlier on that he normally, when the schools break up in July, we normally get an influx of people over exuberance in some areas, sort of. But I think we do need to work out how we can support those people coming through, because I think there's a growing, as Paul Hewitt mentioned earlier on, there's a growing concern around mental health about people and support into some job markets. And just one final one, which Adam might be able to explain more on, is we're also concerned about the younger generation, and actually from all ages, of people who are either in protected jobs or disabled, or trying to go back into the recruitment and job market is quite a challenge, and how we support them through it. And that is something that Mark Billington's team is trying to pull together across northwest London to try and get something in there. But I don't think we do it on our own, and that's where we need other companies. I think Adam might know more around that area.
Sure, I'm gonna bring Adam in, but before I do, we are coming up to 8 o'clock, and I know people do want to get off. So last time I did offer bonus points for brevity, and I will do so again. So on that point, I'll bring Adam in.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to pick up on digital inclusion, because I think Sarah, and you'll know I'm very passionate about this area. Dan and I both sat on the Universal Credit Commission, and one of the key areas that we looked at was actually people need to be have access to digital technologies in order to access universal credit. I got an email recently from someone who said, there's a real issue that the booking system in the depot is only online. I said, the challenge is, if you're not online, forget about the booking system in the depot. Think of all the things you're excluded from during coronavirus and only more going forward. So we have to have ways of tackling it. We did bring the Google Digital Bus to Harrow a year or so ago, and we're looking at how we can use some of the education materials that are on offer. But I think the other thing that we can do as a council is to make sure that there's as much digital access across all of our facilities as possible. And there's a big focus on, for example, the children's centres, of course, the libraries as well, but opportunities where in the community we can support people to both access digital devices, but also ideally, provide support and training around that as well. But it is a challenge, and one that I think is incredibly only more important as we go forward.
Thank you very much. I've got, in terms of members of the committee, I've got Jeff, Chris, and Jean. If people can be brief, I'll appreciate that.
Can you take me off? I was going to ask a question when we were talking about grants, but we moved on from there. So,
okay, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one slightly further on the report, talking about ICT rollout for the council. I'd just like to get, as it's in here, an update, because one of the key things, if we go further in and with the flu possibly coming up in October, November, we'll get a spike in corona, as they reckon. We'll need a better ICT to get us out. How far advanced are we with that? And the other one is just a quick one. It's a comment, really. Why on the recycling did we do? I understand why we did, and I thought it was a very good idea doing it by postcodes, then let a mad run for a short while before we did a booking system, because the roads for that short time were bone solid again when it was opened up like that. I just wonder whose logical thinking was that.
So I just pick up very quickly.
On IT, yes, 10 years as a councillor, every year someone's brought up IT, so always good fun.
Very passionate about this one too. So look, Chris, we are undergoing a once-in-a-generation upgrade in the council's IT systems. We've underinvested for a decade. We've gone for things which are cheap, for reasons which we all understand. And now, still with a strong eye to cost, we are upgrading almost everything you could imagine. And now we're biting off an awful lot. I'll be very honest with you, there's some risk to that. But actually, if we can deliver, we can pull this off over the next 12 to 18 months, we will be at the forefront, and you won't believe this, but we will be at the forefront of local government IT in this country. It's a lot to pull off, because we know where our IT is at the moment, but it's just to give you a sense of the scale of ambition and what's already happening right at the moment as these new devices with Office 365 with Windows 10 are being rolled out.
Thank you. Supplement just if I can quickly. On that basis, and we're now getting a director of IT, we need to actually bring it back in-house where we control it, not the outsides. I wanted my iPad upgraded. It took 6 weeks to get it done.
Councillor, I have been campaigning to insource our IT for quite some time, and so we can be allies on that journey. And it's all happening in October when the contract with our IT outsourcer comes to an end.
Thank you. Just quickly on the
can I bring you in on the booking system? It's a great system. Can you talk about how wonderful it is?
I'll be very brief on the booking system, but Adam did announce the ICT last year, and he's still announcing that. But it is going to be world class. With when the recycling centre reopened, it did start working well with the postcode system we had in place. The trouble is, people started turning up, and there was queues for 2 or 3 hours trying to get in. Because of the social distancing at the top of the ramp, it was a lot slower going through. The trouble was, it was blocking off all the local roads. They were totally gridlocked, and the police were getting quite concerned, but also the local businesses and residents were also getting seriously concerned. So not just us, but a number of councils across London have introduced a booking system to try and control the accessibility to the depot. We're looking to see how it can be improved. The people who use it say it's working exceptionally well, and it also manages in a timely way. It's going to be reviewed at the end of July of how we can improve it, but we're also trying to see how far we can increase the throughput, so it means more cars can join in. But the key problem we have is once that queue gets out into Masons Avenue and Christchurch Avenue and that sort of area, we do have it blocks off the whole part of that area, and you get nothing, and people are very majorly concerned, especially the emergency services.
Okay.
Can I just say, Sachin, on that one? I totally agree with you. I think it's a wonderful system booking it, but why did we go through that period where you opened it up and it was free for all, and the roads got completely blocked then?
Okay, I know Stephen wants to come in on the booking system, so I'm gonna quickly allow a 30-second question from Stephen.
Yes, the query I have about the booking system is why can you only use it on PCs and not phones or tablets? It doesn't work. A number of people have raised that with me, and I've checked it myself, and it doesn't work on phones and tablets.
Great, Graham.
Well, it goes back to Chris's point, really. We needed to bring a booking system in because of the traffic problem. We didn't have it ready at that time. It links into the Bartek system, which manages the waste control system, and it is probably and there's there is some issues, not major issues, but it's room for improvement, so it will improve.
Great, that's fantastic answer. Going to be improved. Jean.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good. IT, I welcome it in-house. Thank you. Mine's essentially about schools. I obviously read the document, and it's looking obviously everything's in place that can be in place. But it'd be very interesting to know, given that we're trying to get schooling available to everyone, every child, how we're going to manage that with some of our schools are particularly very limited in space. So what we be doing about how we're going to organise that in terms of premises. I mean, I know how Shaftesbury's doing it, but none of it is very straightforward. Another question is essentially around safeguarding and how we make sure that the children are safe. I had a couple of other questions, one from Councillor Hinckley, which was about buses and how they're only taking 10 people on a bus, and how can the school kids travel on buses when there aren't enough spaces on the buses because of the COVID social distancing. So really the one is around children's schooling and safeguarding.
Great. I'm going to ask Paul Hewitt to answer these.
Thank you.
So we will work alongside and with our head teachers. This very morning we had 2 Zoom meetings, dare I say Zoom, sorry, with our head teachers, with the Director of Public Health, looking precisely at how they would open up schools in September to the wider numbers. So there is no doubt it will be a challenge. But what I can tell you is that the head teachers and governing bodies, and your school being one of them, are very much up for it, and they are committed to it, notwithstanding that they are exhausted at this moment in time. They are looking forward to getting this done, and I have great faith in the community of schools in Harrow. And it will be a challenge, but I'm sure that we'll find ways, creative solutions for making this happen. And having the Director of Public Health working alongside our head teachers is a great combination. In terms of safeguarding, well, our statutory duties haven't changed during COVID. They're exactly the same. So we will be applying the same processes around identification, assessment and review, and working with our stakeholders, particularly schools, to make sure we respond quickly to areas of need and to offer early help. And we do have a range of programs available even over the summer, and we expect to be able to meet that need.
Would it, sorry, Sasha, but it would be useful to see that if it's an open document, if you like, because one of the issues, as you know, Paul, is around issues around safeguarding for vulnerable children, particularly child. You know, it's because of the pressures. Has been increasing, hasn't it?
Yes. So, I mean, families have been responding, though, to some of the digitised early help programmes in a way that they weren't responding before, in terms of physically going to delivery sites. So that's an interesting development, and one that we will capitalise on for the future.
Okay, thank you. I will park the one about buses. I'm sure we can follow that up another time. I'm not talking about school buses. I'm actually talking about that Hatch End High. They all pile onto a bus.
We will. Thank you, Julie. Honey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question about the bottom half of page 14. It does say that it references a pause in consultation and engagement. Then it goes on to say that there has been a disproportionate number of deaths in Harrow from COVID-19, and it's clear from the Public Health England report that ethnicity and inequality are critical factors in the deaths, and that our BAME communities are more likely to suffer the negative impacts, whether that's the virus itself, economic or social shocks. And then the following sentence says that it's vitally important that the council and its partners fully understand the nature and issues facing all of the communities in Harrow. So I'm just wondering how we're going about that with the pauses in consultation and engagement, and what we're doing to make sure that they do not get left behind.
Thank you, and Alex is going to field this one.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Honey. So we are working through a partnership called the Health and Social Care Exec, which meets every Friday morning, which is all the health and social care partners, including PCN directors as well. And on the basis of the impact on our communities via COVID, where it is true that we have seen a disproportionate level of deaths for the Harrow population as a whole nationally, that we are trying to understand both from a community perspective, the inequality aspect. So those communities of our minority BAME communities, where they are, through the occupations and the other aspects of their lives, more exposed to the risks posed by COVID-19, but also given their propensity to have other comorbidities, which increase again the risk of what the impact is of COVID-19 to them. So as a result of that, we've agreed with health partners that there's a piece of work that we'll do in conjunction with public health, which is looking at those two aspects. And therefore, through some of the work we talked about working with HASVO earlier on the item around police and community safety, on a test, track and trace, similar type of work with those community groups to understand how we can work through and get the engagement right around what some of the responses may well be. And obviously we'd have health partners on board with that work, but also ensuring that we've understood sort of the lifestyle impacts with regards to occupation and things like that, again, through those communities. So the Somali community, for instance, if you are a Somali man, you are more likely to be working as a cab driver. And if you're a Somali woman, you're more likely to be working in the care sector. And that's information that we've got from HASFO, for instance. And I appreciate that's not all of the population, but just those two occupations increases the risk to catching COVID-19 purely through the occupation that's going on. Then you throw in other aspects in terms of potential propensity for some of the comorbidities which increase the risk of the impact, and you've got a real sort of challenge around that. So we'll be working with the communities in Harrow on those particular aspects with our health partners, if that helps as an example of how we'll do that.
Honey, was that okay? Have you any other follow-ups?
That was really useful, Alex. Thank you.
No problem.
I do appreciate that. It's really tricky in these times, but I got your reassurance now that we are still trying to communicate with those communities and see all of the issues that they have. So thank you.
Yeah. So we'll build through the test, track and trace work into the public health work as well, so that we try and align it so that we have as many conversations through the same channel than just keep going back and having continuous ones with the same group, but they're all disjointed and fractured. So that's the challenge that we're trying to deal with.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I cut off Stephen, and I said I would come back to him if you've got anything that you want to add or any other questions.
The main question I wanted to ask was about schools, but Jean's asked that one. I did want to ask just quickly about just general normal council services and how we're doing in terms of getting normal service levels restored, and when we can expect that to be sort of complete.
Graham, can you on that?
Yes, this is a major and big piece of work in a way, because we have to make an out-of-date civic centre COVID safe as such. When people are working there, to make it quite safe, that people can sort of not sit next to desks to each other, making one-way systems. They're trying to reduce the number of people into the civic centre itself. I'm picking the civic centre first because I want to come on to some of the other services that need to come back to normal. But so what we're trying to do is through the IT upgrades that Adam was talking about a bit earlier, giving more capability of people working at home and them trying to manage people coming into the civic on a controlled basis to make sure that we can keep people safe when they are in there. With some of the other services, most of them are sort of our frontline services are building back up again. The ones we haven't is sort of things. Our frontline services around environment are coming back in line, but some of the staff have been located into other jobs. So with the work they've done on Saturday around opening business up and advising businesses meant they couldn't deal with some of the other antisocial behaviour stuff they've dealt with in the past. So some of the investigations around noise and stuff, they've been pulled into doing supporting this work around reopening the high streets. This is building up a period of time. I just would like to make a comment just to reinforce something around schools. I've great credit really to our schools that have been open all the way through the pandemic. The teachers have been working very hard to try and keep in touch with students. It's sometimes very hard when they're on trying to use for online when some of the students haven't got online capability, and actually reaching out to them, the people they know, to make sure they're safe and okay. And they've done very well to enable schools and the head teachers, the staff and the governing bodies worked hard to sort of try and get them children back a few weeks ago, and that was a staggered sort of approach. And they're now working to try and get the children's capacity to increase even further over the summer holidays, when normally they get some form of break and start preparing into sort of September. They're having to deal with a large number of things remotely, and I think it's very hard. And so we've got to pay credit really to Paulo said it about Paddy's team, who actually are supporting the schools if they get stuck, and about what to do, uncertainty, and giving advice and actually support to try and get these things done. It is going to be a major challenge to get a number of children back. There's a lot of people who are very nervous around moving back out into the sort of into the community, and that's not going to go away. And so there is a lot of pressure on council services. A lot of people in the public sector, even the health service, is sort of trying to get people to go on holiday in readiness of trying to deal with the backlog of operations and health operations. So I think there's a lot of things going on, and we need to understand there's a lot of pressure in the system that it was making it sort of, from Paul's point of view, it's sort of, very can be levels of concern is raised because there might be something coming through that we'll be quick to respond to, and that's what Paul's team's been dealing with and trying to prepare for something over the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to come in? Use the raise hand button, use the comment function, or just unmute yourself and shout so I can see if there is anyone else. I can't see anyone indicating, so I think that's not. So I'm going to bring this item to a close. Can I thank Graham and Adam for coming? I know you had cabinet briefing today as well, so thank you for having back-to-back meetings. Thank you for that. Can I thank all the officers that have joined for this item? No doubt you had cabinet briefing as well, so thank you all for coming. Can I thank well, basically everyone, so thank you all for all your participation. It is really useful. I think we've learned a lot out of this session, and I think we've got a lot out of it. So on that note, I don't think we need to note anything, so I'll move on to item 11, which is any other urgent business. I've not been notified of anything. I can't see anyone. So thank you very much. At 8:16, I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.